I stand by the decision because from every criteria by which we measure our mission, and whether that's calorie reduction, spreading organic agriculture, or supporting fair trade, tea and sugar growing communities, we've expanded our impact without compromise. And so we have more low or zero calorie drinks than we ever had. We're buying actually more than 20 times the amount of organic ingredients we were before Coke invested. And with respect to fair trade premiums, at the time that Coke invested, we were investing about $30,000 back into these communities. Last year, we invested over $530,000 back into these communities.
Welcome to the Business for Good podcast,
a show where we, Paul Shapiro and Toni Okamoto,
spotlight companies making money by helping solve some of the world's most pressing problems. All right, folks, welcome to episode 3 of the Business for Good podcast. We hope you enjoyed the interviews with John Mackey and Lisa Schoen, and we have got another really great one for you today. Seth Goldman and his story have been an inspiration to me for many years, and I don't doubt that he'll inspire you too.
Seth, thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be with you guys.
In fact, I think we've both consumed Honest Tea and Beyond Meat products this week alone, so thanks for that too.
Thank you.
So Seth, you and I first became acquainted over email many years ago. And while we've known each other for many years via email, because I messaged you after I heard you on NPR, and I've certainly enjoyed your two companies' products many hundreds of times during those years, it wasn't until 2015 that you and I actually met in person, and the circumstances that led to us meeting in person, sadly, weren't exactly pleasant for either one of us. Do you recall what happened?
I do. It was quite a lesson in, frankly, how the media just overblows a story when they want to.
Yes. Do you want to tell listeners what happened?
Yeah. So we've had quotes underneath our bottle caps for years, and so we had a bottle cap quote. It was by Donald Trump. And I think it says something like, if you're going to think, you may as well think big.
That's it.
And quoted Donald Trump. And so that there was absolutely a sentiment with which we agree. And we had put that on probably, back in 2012 or so. And we have a natural rotation whereby we remove quotes just, to keep things fresh. And so I think, you tweeted a picture of the bottle caps and talked about what's this election doing in my
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't want any revisionist history here. All I said, I didn't mention the election. All I said was that I thought it was funny to see Donald Trump being quoted in a bottle of organic green tea. I didn't express any editorializing of it at all. But then,
well, it's funny you say that, yeah, because we didn't mean to certainly editorialize at all either.
Right. Right.
And our social media person had mentioned that the quote, is no longer in circulation, meaning we weren't printing new caps with it. But then a reporter, I guess, sort of seized on that to say that Honest Tea was taking a political stance by removing a Donald Trump quote, which of course was not the case. So in a way, it was one of the early pieces of fake news.
Yeah.
And after that, got invited to go on CNN and all these other shows. And I just said, this isn't a story. This is just a normal process. But I was surprised. And I guess what was going on, and it was certainly the case, that any news, especially because this one happened over the winter holidays, so news cycles were slow, and so they were just trying to leap on anything that had a news story, a controversy about Donald Trump.
Right? Yeah, it was December of 2015, and I was drinking that bottle of Honest Tea by myself, and if I had been with a friend, I would have just said, "Hey, look, this is funny." But because I was by myself, I tweeted it, and that's when I got a call from an AP reporter asking it. And I said, I just thought it was funny that a bottle of organic green tea had Donald Trump. That was it. And then it was like, it just kept on going, and it was unbelievable. But so that's how we came to meet in person, which was a great time. And so while I've been a fan, both of yours and of Honest Tea and Beyond Meats for a long time, I'm ashamed to say it wasn't until this week, in preparation for this interview, that I read your book, Mission in a Bottle. And I've got to say, it was really excellent. I didn't realize it was in graphic comic style until I downloaded it. But it's a straight up business book with lots of financial details about Honest Tea's struggles and triumphs. So Let me ask you, what led you to write a serious business book in graphic comic format, and how was the book received by people who read business books?
Well, thank you for your comments on the book, and it was really fun to write. This one came together because my oldest son is dyslexic, and so he has always gravitated towards graphic stories. And so in his senior year of high school, which was right around the time we had sold Honest Tea, he was I would say struggling to remain interested in his senior year. He'd gotten into college already, and so I was tasked with sort of helping him keep his grades up enough so that he wouldn't lose his college acceptance. And so we would spend a lot of time together at night with me trying to encourage him to do homework, and him mostly interested in reading comic books. And so as he was reading comic books, he kind of was more influential on me than I was on him. And he would I would pull me into these different comic books he was reading. I thought, boy, this is such an absorbing and engaging way to tell a story. And I had thought, because we had just sold Honest Tea, that, maybe there was a way I should share the story about building Honest Tea, but didn't want to make it like so many of the other books where you sort of the first chapter or two is interesting, where someone's building the company, and then you sort of get into this little, mostly self-congratulatory story about the business. And so basically it was a little bit of, he got his comic book in my business book, and I got my business book in his comic book, and I realized that was a fun way to tell the story. And of course, my co-founder Barry was game to do it, and because he's such a creative thinker himself. And so we just had a lot of fun telling the story, and the response has been so positive because we've reached, the book has reached so many of the people who wouldn't normally pick up a business book. And frankly, that was the goal too, So creating a business book that my son would be interested in really made it a much more accessible story.
I've watched a few of your talks online, and I saw you talking about Jonah. Is that right, Jonah, your son?
Yeah, that's right.
And how doctors wanted to put a Band-Aid on the problem by providing medication. And that actually goes into my next question. As you imply in the name of your book, Mission in a Bottle, the goal of Honest Tea wasn't just to sell tea. You had a mission. And at first, at least, that mission was to create a product that could help reduce sugar calories in the American diet. Can you tell us why this was your mission, and why, after working with NGOs and charities, you thought starting a corporation would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, and I don't try to cover it up. I really think of myself as an activist, and the same with respect to Beyond Meat as well, which we can talk about later. But for me, I think about, well, if there's some change that I would want to make happen as an activist, and in whether it's helping America's shift to healthier diets, or helping support more sustainable agriculture, or helping to create economic opportunity in the developing world. What would I do if I were a nonprofit activist? What would I do if I were a government actor? And what would I do if I were a private company? And so what's neat about the way we've built and developed Honest Tea is we do have very much those missions within our business, but we know that none of those things happen unless the business works. Which, if the tea doesn't taste good, then people don't buy it, and then we don't create any demand for organic ingredients or for the, lower calorie drinks. And if the label isn't, or the name isn't attractive, then we don't gain a place on the shelf, and then once again we don't see our mission happen. So there's no question that we have to be, the business has to thrive for the mission to have the impact, but we've always used the mission as our guiding star for the decisions we make, and what's been so wonderful and gratifying about the way we built Honest Tea is that we've seen our growth and expansion and impact all move together at the same time.
So, Seth, just to give people background who aren't necessarily familiar with the tea market per se, when you enter the market, so Snapple was the big incumbent. They've got like 180 calories per bottle. You start selling bottles at about like 35 calories per bottle, right?
Yeah.
And so tell us about that decision. And then, so, obviously anybody who switches from Snapple to Honest Tea in that case back then would have been, saving about 145 calories or so. But also, so tell us about that decision, but also about the effect that you had on Snapple itself and what they ended up doing to respond.
Sure. Well, even more. So back in 1995, when we really first came across the idea, Snapple's average calories per 8 ounces was 100. So it was really, and a 16-ounce bottle had 200 calories, which, I basically, and I used to like iced tea, and I just said one day, I just can't drink this. I just don't need this much sugar in a bottle. And so, why, and ask the question, why isn't anyone making a drink with one or instead of, 8 or 10 teaspoons, why 1 or 2 teaspoons? And my co-founder, Barry, sugar, agreed that was an opportunity and there was something missing. And so we did really recognize that this was not going to be a drink for everybody. And it still isn't. There are people who do like a much sweeter drink. And the good news at the time was there was plenty of competition for anyone who wanted a sweeter drink. There was virtually no competition for anyone wanting a less sweet drink. And even if we, in the beginning, because people's taste palates were different when we started, but even if people's taste palates were, preferring, maybe only 20% of the people wanted it, we kind of had a monopoly with that 20%. And so that was just a strong position to start from. And we found we had consumers who were loyal and passionate about our product and would sometimes, harass grocery store managers if they couldn't find it. So those were great champions to have on our side. And what we found is not just with tea, but as also with our kids' drinks. We brought out a line, Honest Kids, back in 2007. And as that business started to grow and consumers started to move toward it, the competition, just by creating the success we did in the marketplace, that the competitors followed us. And, that really is a great example of how our impact can have ripples. And there's a great quote from the CEO of Patagonia, and she said, "You want to make it uncomfortable for your competitors not to follow you," and that's how you make impact happen. And in the case of the kids market and the iced tea market, the rest of the market has shifted, and of course it's meant more competition for us. But that was the goal always, was to help move the market to a different center point.
Right. And so, you not only were reducing calories in the American diet by millions of calories from people switching to Honest Tea, but Snapple, reduced its own calories from, I think you wrote,
right,
180 calories per bottle to 140 calories per bottle. And so that alone probably removed billions more calories from people's diets. It's really impressive to see the impact there.
Thank you. One of the most exciting developments we've just seen, we just launched our Honest Kids line in McDonald's in the Happy Meal at the end of last year. And we're projected to sell over 200 million units of that product with McDonald's this year. And if you take the calorie differential, so our 35 calorie drink has gone in place of a drink that was 80 calories. So you take 45 calories times actually a little more than 200 million. That on its own is about 1 billion calories removed from the American diet, with an audience that's obviously mostly younger. So really exciting to see, if we can get that younger palate attuned and acclimated to a less sweet taste profile, then you sort of project out the impact of that shift is really profound.
My background is in healthy eating, and I like that you have shared your story about how you're a runner and you're more health conscious, and you saw a gap that needed to be filled and you filled it, and you used business to do that. I think that's really amazing.
Thank you.
In terms of starting a company, you half joke in the book about the most important keystroke in the history of honesty. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, yeah. So you're starting on your own in your house, and there's so much to do. It can be overwhelming. And so I had enough experience, just working on my computer that I won't say I was addicted to solitaire, but I knew that, having any kind of distraction would be really detrimental, because I would always, whenever things got tough, I would just gravitate towards, that distraction. And so literally within the first day of setting up, my computer in my office, I said, I'm going to have to delete the solitaire from my computer. And I remember they said, "Are you sure you want to delete this?" And I pushed yes, I had to do it. And it doesn't mean that I shouldn't find ways to distract and relax, but doing it on a computer, was not the right distraction.
I don't want to offer any spoilers on the book at what happens in the end, but since you've already alluded to it, the book, it really does a great job of chronicling the ups and the many downs of starting and growing a company, in this case, a beverage company. But it won't come as a surprise that it concludes with you and your co-founder, Barry, after more than a decade of building Honesty, you sold the brand to Coke. And you note that a lot of your customers weren't exactly thrilled that their favorite brand of organic fair trade tea was now owned by what they saw as the big, bad multinational soda peddler. So just tell us why you made the decision and how you handled that criticism. And now, several years later, what that impact has been like.
Right. Well, it was certainly something we were conscious of, and we knew that especially our core natural consumer was going to have at the very least, a concerned reaction, if not a negative reaction. And we made a point of, look, we didn't take the decision lightly, and we put a lot of thought into it, and stand by the decision. We still stand by it today. And so we thought we've got to be transparent about why we did it. And it was always, going back to this earliest conversation we had, for us, it was always about the impact of what we were building. And we knew that, Honest Tea, as a $23 million business, sold in 15,000 accounts, mostly on the coast, was a nice model for what a business could do, but it wasn't really driving the kind of impact. Our goal was never just to sell healthy drinks to healthy people. It was to democratize organics, to make them available everywhere beverages are sold. And so we needed a partner who could help us scale. And so with the transaction with Coca-Cola, we have expanded from just the 15,000 accounts to over 140,000 accounts now, not to mention our launch in Europe and other countries. And so, but at the time when we announced the decision, I personally responded to every email. I wanted to make sure people understood that I was behind, supported the decision, why we did it. And now here's what's interesting. So we've been connected to Coca-Cola now longer than Honest Tea was an independent company. So, 10 years into the business, and we're now 20 years and 10 months. So we've been connected to Coke longer. And I stand by the decision because from every criteria by which we measure our mission, and whether that's calorie reduction, spreading organic agriculture, or supporting fair trade, tea and sugar growing communities, we've expanded our impact without compromise. And so we have more low or zero calorie drinks than we ever had. We're buying actually more than 20 times the amount of organic ingredients we were before Coke invested. And with respect to fair trade premiums, at the time that Coke invested, we were investing about $30,000 back into these communities. Last year, we invested over $530,000 back into these communities. So, and now that we see our launch happening in Europe, it within a matter of years could be well over $1 million that we're investing annually back into these communities. So this is more than a model of change. This is a driver of change, and it's just really exciting to see the impact continue. And the only other point I'll make is that the fact that I'm still connected and working with Honest Tea is, I think, another indicator of the fact that the mission is intact. I would not stick around if this was a brand that I didn't think was living up to its mission. And in fact, what I say is Honest Tea is actually more honest now than it was when we started, because our mission is so much more rigorous.
I imagine you lost credibility with some smaller, hardcore organic communities, but how much weight does it carry now that you say you're part of the Coca-Cola company, especially when talking with people that you can potentially work with, like suppliers?
Yeah. I don't know if we lost credibility. We certainly, there was a pause where they said, let's see how we do. And I've had the conversation with multiple stakeholders and at the time I challenged them. I said, if you see us in any way backing down or compromising what we stand for, let me know. And we haven't heard that. So I would say, we really have continued to been respected and part of these communities that we started with. And it's nice. We literally do work with some of the same tea gardens that we started with 20 years ago. And so I was just in India a few months ago, and to see how much deeper and broader our impact is with these communities is also really, really powerful and gratifying. So, I think what's neat too is I was just in Europe earlier this year, and we're launching Honest Tea now across 40 markets in Europe. And to see them understand that if they're going to launch this brand, they have to do it within the right guardrails of the lower calorie, organic, and fair trade. And so this now feels like it really is going, beyond just what my own efforts were.
Well, that's really great.
So, Seth, you kind of alluded to this. now Honest Tea is known for being organic and fair trade, but, that wasn't always the case. So how do you decide to add those to the company's mission after starting? And really, what advice do you have for founders of companies today who might want to, do it all, so to speak, when it comes to some of these goals?
Well, it's neat. We actually have our original business plan. It's still on Honest Tea's website. And in that original business plan, we did not foresee or predict the organic and the fair trade, but we did include in our original business plan a statement of aspirations for social responsibility. And in that statement, we laid out what our general approach was going to be, which was we were going to try to, certainly lower calorie was already contemplated, but that we were going to try to make the decisions that were, took into account environmental and responsibility and our commitment to trying to create wealth at a community level. And so even though we didn't specifically say organic or fair trade, that was embedded in the business. And I think what I would say to anybody launching a business is understand where you want to go, even if you don't necessarily know how to get there. Make it clear what you commit yourself to, and in turn, you're committing your investors to and your other stakeholders. And for us, what happened was, starting with lower calorie, we knew that was part of the business. But once we got to visit the tea gardens, I understood that tea is one of the few agricultural products that's never rinsed. And so what happens is if any chemicals are sprayed on tea leaves, anytime the hot water gets poured on the leaves, the chemicals actually get washed into the tea, not washed off. They get washed into the drink. So that's what you're drinking. And then as I started to visit more growing communities, I saw and learned that tea is one of the cheapest commodities in the world. And so we could pay a small premium and still have a product whose cost of goods was very competitive. But in so doing, with that premium, we would be able to reinvest back into these communities to make sure not only that the wages they're paid are meeting world, global standards, but that they're also able to invest a portion of this money back into their community, into schools and healthcare and their own infrastructure. And so these things really came about from that original founding statement. And I would say the business still is built in line with that statement.
So I've watched a lot of videos of yours, and you have some really cool things going on. I love that you are out in the communities, that you've visited them, that you've worked with the people. That is special. But I also really love your social experiments, like the honest social experiment that tests your consumers. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, it's fun. We, for years, our marketing has always been focused on how do we connect with people so that they get to experience the taste of our product, but also experience, the ideas behind the product. And so in the early years, it's literally was just me standing behind a table, giving people a cup of tea and letting them taste it. And then we brought on interns and field marketers, and we've grown that part of it. But then we said, well, all right, once we get beyond being able to sample in every store, how do we still find ways to interact with people? And so what we did is we set up racks of tea in cities all across the country and an empty lucite box where people could choose to put $1 in or not. And there was a sign that said, honest store, $1 a bottle, but we also said it was the honor system. And so it's so fun to step back and see people walk up to the booth, maybe take a bottle of tea, maybe decide whether or not to pay, go through their own little internal debate and pay. And what was gratifying about the experiments is that consistently more than 90% of Americans would put money in the box. And when I would ask people, what's your guess about how honest people are, they'd say, maybe 70%. So one of the things we're able to share is that people are more honest than most people assume. And of course, it was a great way for every city had its own local story, and we just got tons of coverage for that. One of the challenges we've had recently as we do this is people are not carrying cash around the way they used to. So we've had to find ways to reinvent the experiment.
Yeah, I imagine going into that, you didn't know if you would lose money, but the amount of money and coverage alone must have been millions and millions of dollars you recovered with that particular social experiment by, it seems like, every national media outlet. So that's awesome.
We were on the Today Show, Good Morning America. It's a really fun story and a positive story too.
So I'd love to move over to Beyond Meat and ask why you've been moved so heavily into the plant-based meat world.
So you mentioned my son, Jonah, and he was actually the person who I mentioned how he was, looks at the world differently. And he was the one who started this whole journey for our family about 13 years ago when he decided he wanted to become a vegetarian. And partially out of, empathy, we wanted to help. He was 13 years old at the time. We wanted just to show we were sympathetic to him. But also as he started asking the questions, and he would say to us, well, if we can meet our dietary needs without having to kill another animal or another sentient being, why wouldn't we try to do that? And so we thought it would be worth trying. And so our family became vegetarian about 13 years ago, but we were always consistently dissatisfied with the plant-based protein, replacement options. And I've joked that veggie burgers are a secret conspiracy by the meat industry to discourage people from becoming vegetarian because they taste so unappealing. In fact, usually when a meat eater tastes a veggie burger, they'll say, yeah, this is why I'm not a vegetarian. It's just not that good. And so back in 2012, my wife was reading an article about this company getting started on the West Coast that called Beyond Meat that was getting started and was, aspired to transform the meat counter in the grocery store into the protein counter so that instead of just, chicken breast and hamburgers, you'd have, chicken protein, cow protein, and plant protein, all part of the same continuum. And that vision really hit me as something I could understand and get excited about. And so I literally sent an email to info@beyondmeat.com and said, I've built Honest Tea and learned a lot of lessons. I'd be happy to share it with you. And if there's any way I can help, please let me know. And Ethan Brown, the CEO, reached back out and said, love to get your advice and help as we try to grow this business. So I joined the board and, became an investor. And Ethan and I got into such a great partnership around decision-making for the business and how to grow it and strategy that I came on as executive chair of the board a few years ago and have really just loved the chance to help build this business and personally loved the chance to eat the products, which have made our whole family much, we were happy before, but much more satisfied vegetarians because now we bought a grill. We didn't used to be able to use a grill at home. We have dinners that we can invite friends over to and not make them feel like, we're asking them to eat products that they, might not feel are as good as what they are used to eating at home. So it's just been a really fun business to build and of course, very impact driven as well, because we know, we're having an impact on the diet, on planet, on health as well.
Yeah, I love the Beyond Burger. I hang out with a lot of non-vegetarians and we went to a burger place and I had everyone taste the burger, which I didn't realize was a Beyond Burger. They said it was a vegan patty, but they didn't know what kind of vegan patty. And I was convinced that it was meat. So I had all of my non-vegetarian friends try it and they're like, I think it's meat. I'm not sure. I can't tell. And later found out that it was the Beyond Meat patty. So I think that when you can serve it to non-vegetarians and they can really be thrown off whether it's meat or not, you're doing something right.
That's great to hear. Yeah, it really, and that was the goal with this business was because of the product, first of all, to get carried in the meat section. And that wasn't a slam dunk, just because we want it to be carried in the meat section doesn't mean the meat buyer is going to agree to that. But we knew if we wanted to really transform the diet, we had to get out of the freezer section. And the freezer is where most plant-based or vegetarian meats are sold. And that's good if you only want to sell to 5% of the population. But if you want to reach that much broader audience, you have to get to the meat section. And so what's so neat, we launched in several national chains now, and we've got a chain out in California where the Beyond Burger is the top-selling packaged burger in the meat section. Not just the top-selling plant-based burger, but the top-selling packaged burger, period. And of course, for us, that is a huge breakthrough and creates so much more opportunity for us because with that kind of success rate, the other chains are following them. And so now at Beyond Meat, we're just scrambling to make as much of the product as we can.
That's amazing.
That is really amazing. So notwithstanding that story, which is a truly incredible story, plant-based meats right now, they make up about 1/4% of all of the meat that is sold in the U.S. and even less globally.
Yep.
What will it take for plant-based meats to break out in the same way, for example, that plant-based milks have done, where they actually start taking away market share from conventional meat? Do you think it's going to require companies like Beyond Meat and others to get acquired by a big company like Honest Tea did with Coke?
No, so you're right. I mean, just to give you a sense, plant-based dairy is about 14% of the dairy market. And what happened there? What was the transformation? It wasn't that big companies got involved. It was that the category transformed. What it used to be was soy milk in an aseptic box, on a dry shelf next to some other grains or some other natural food niche product. When it started to move is when the companies like Silk took soy milk, put it in a box that was the same kind of merchandisable box that was where a milk carton was in, and then it got merchandised adjacent to the milk. And so that's for just the same with Beyond Meat. As I said, when we're only in 5% we're only in the freezers, we're only reaching that 5% of the market. When we get into the meat section with a product that can be merchandised adjacent to a hamburger, when that product performs the way a product like the Beyond Burger performs, then all of a sudden you start to move the market. And that's exactly what's happening. And of course, I mentioned just this one chain that we're in, but I can guarantee you in that chain that the Beyond Burger is far more than 1% or even 5% of the sales of that category. And so that's how you move it. You need a product to transform. And when you can do a product like we have, we start to reach a different audience. And so I don't, for Honest Tea, it was much more about distribution. We, as I said, we're only in about 15,000 stores, mostly on the coast. We weren't reaching all the people we wanted to reach. But with Beyond Meat, we're seeing this business scale and be able to be available to all the people who want to reach it. We just have to make sure we can produce enough of the product. And that's where we're putting most of our resources right now.
Great. So let me allow myself just to push back a little bit on that and get your reaction. So, Silk was at once an independent company, and I believe that their transformation that you talked about was also coincided with them being acquired by a major dairy company.
It actually happened beforehand. I think one of the reasons Dean bought it, Dean made an investment and they did help scale it.
Okay.
But one of the reasons Dean took that interest was because they started to see the impact they were having.
Yes.
So I think it probably happened in combination. But I can say, what we see at Beyond Meat, at least thus far, has happened very much with us as an independent company.
For sure.
And as we see, what stands in the way, it's not that we need some magical distributor to, or company to follow the sky with incredible distribution. We just need to invest in the infrastructure to build production capable of supporting this, and of course to do it quickly and to continue to innovate, which we're doing, and stay ahead of the competition.
Cool, thanks for that. So you had some big breakout moments with Honest Tea, like when Oprah sang its praises, or when it was revealed that it was Barack Obama's favorite drink. So first, just if you don't mind quickly telling the story about how Honest Tea became a 2008 presidential campaign issue, not just the news story, but an actual issue in the campaign. And then what I really want to know is whether you see something similar, like what would be your prediction in the plant-based meat market? Are we going to have a president who's going to say Beyond Meat is his or her favorite burger?
That's fun. Well, with Honest Tea, we are decidedly nonpartisan. We believe in organic and lower calorie tea should be available to everybody. So we certainly don't take sides, but we have had all types of people who have reached out to us to tell us how much they like the tea. And in the case of the 2008 political campaign, there had been a story talking about how President Obama, had his handler, the people who sort of handle his schedule, always insisted that there be Honest Tea available wherever he goes. And we knew this because at one point his campaign was going to Jackson, Mississippi, and they couldn't find Honest Tea, and they called us to say, where can we find it? And we had to, send them to a little food co-op down there. But then President John McCain's campaign criticized, the fact that he favored a tea that was. They even used the word that what hurt me the most was they said he he tries to buy this hard to find honest. Oh, you don't have to rub it in. Of course, that was another impetus for us to say, look, we need more distribution. But so that was an amusing moment. I can't say that whether or not that helped us sell more tea or not, it just helped create some more visibility for us. With Beyond Meat, we are seeing this kind of exposure in so many ways. I feel like that's already happening. There was an episode of South Park just this past season where Cartman, his girlfriend, had become a vegetarian, and so he wanted to, stay in her favor. So he started putting the word Beyond on all these different. So he says, "Hey, here's some Beyond KFC," and that was an amazing cultural moment for a company which was doing just really still in the early stages of distribution. But we've heard from all types of different athletes, some of which we've announced, some of which we haven't yet, who are shifting to plant-based diets and are of course Leonardo DiCaprio being the most famous recent celebrity who's joined our team. So it's for us. It just feels like our nation is shifting towards at least the very least interest in these diets so quickly, and it feels like Beyond Meat is in the right place at the right time.
All right, winding down here, and as we reach the end, Seth, for any would-be entrepreneurs who want to use the power of business to help improve the world, are there any books or other resources aside from Mission in a Bottle, of course, that you'd recommend?
Let's see. There are a lot of inspiring stories out there. I appreciate the story. Let My People Go Surfing by Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, and just his approach to how he built the business. I also think the model with Starbucks is a great story because it once again reinforces that values, the values approach to building a brand are important. I also have found, not just the books, but the stories and whether, how I built this podcast is a really fun way to hear different entrepreneurs tell their story. So it's really across the spectrum, but you'll always hear, what the origins of how someone put something together. And to me, that's in that thought process, everyone will hear something of themselves and then just sort of think about, okay, here's how this person took something they cared about and made it into a business. And I believe everybody's got an idea for a business inside them. They just need to think about, how do they connect that idea into the marketplace.
Nice. So, Seth, before we let you go, one of the conventions on this podcast is that while we want to express our gratitude to you for coming on the show, but also allow you to offer any gratitude to anyone or anything that you might be grateful for to conclude us and bring us out here. Oh,
sure. Well, I could never have built Honest Tea the way I did without my wife, Julie Farkas. She was my co-founder, even though her name's not on the label, but she was the force and presence that's helped keep me going during some very challenging times along the way. She was actually the one, as I mentioned, who introduced me to Beyond Meat. And then more than anything, she has been the core of our family. And we were so fortunate to have these three wonderful boys who still give us joy and pride in our, the expressions of our values. Even more than Honest Tea is an expression of my values. And so I just am so lucky and thankful to have found her and that she's still, at my side.
Very nice. Well, Seth Goldman, Honest Tea, Beyond Meat, and Ripple, we're really glad to have you on the show with us. Thanks so much for taking time.
Thank you so much.
Great to be with you guys. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the show.
We hope you got a lot out of it and that you will show us some love. You can rate Business for Good as 5 stars on iTunes, support us on Patreon, and tell your friends interested in business or really just in making the world a better place about the show.
And we'd love to hear what you're thinking. Please feel free to contact us anytime via our website, businessforgoodpodcast.com.
And as always, we hope that you will be in the business of doing good.